So I'm here with Costas Papaikonomou, the real Grumpy Innovator, and we will talk about innovation, disruption, writing, sketching, amongst other topics. And Costas, why don't you just introduce yourself?
Yes, and thank you for having me on the podcast, Emil. Looking forward to this. So I have a long Greek name. Well done on pronouncing that. I'm actually half Greek and half Dutch. I am a typical example of a Gen X, Generation X person. So I had my youth in the 70s, went to school in the early 80s and studied in the early 90s. So I've been working in innovation-related roles for the past 30 years now. Started off as literally grassroots as an engineer, product development, helping design factories, and ending that period of my life after about 10 years as an engineering manager for an equipment, say, producer. Then a little bit my claim to fame, sort of what really expanded my network, was setting up an innovation consulting business with two of my friends. I was the engineer. The other two were the marketer and let's say the consumer behavior specialist. We grew that business, which was called Happen, became Happen Group. Grew that business to about 70 people by 2019. We worked mostly with, let's say, mass market operators, so businesses that sell consumer goods in retail environments. Kind of if you would look at supermarkets and maybe like drugstores, you would have, and pharmacies, you would have like 95% of the types of products we would be working on, where it's like all very big volumes, low margins, quite hard to figure out what to do next. Like if you're in toothpaste, what's the next toothpaste going to be that is actually good enough to get people to stop buying one toothpaste and switch to your toothpaste, that kind of stuff. We sold the business in 2019, and I stuck around with Accenture, who had bought our business for about 2 years. And since then, after I left Accenture in 2021, I've basically gone back to doing a number of things. So I still consult. I still do innovation projects with businesses from the old network, typically slightly different questions, a little more on the strategic end, less on the executional end. I've co-founded an investment fund called Unaterra, which is all about investing in scale-ups in the, let's say, sustainable and environment, or I should actually just say circular economy. That's kind of what we're looking for, material streams that can be cleaned up and made circular. And I spend a lot more time than I did writing, which I really enjoy. So yeah, that's me in a very long nutshell. So thank you for allowing me to draw that out a bit. So let's dive in.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. Out of all these projects, I can't really figure out what made you grumpy. So how did you get into that name?
That's a good question. It was actually something from around 2010. There was actually on British television, there was a program called Grumpy Old Men, who were actually, they were boomers. They were older even than I am.
Yeah.
But what struck me, and the reason for picking that actually as a handle on Twitter first in 2009 or something, or 8, and then putting my first little book out under that name, was I had come into this domain of mass market innovation, which is basically the world of, let's say, the Unilevers and the Sara Lees and the Reckitt Benckiesers. And I'd come into that domain from a slightly different angle that most people come in. Most people come into innovation in that space as a marketing person. It's all about the voice of the consumer. It's all about giving the retailers and their customers what they want. And I came in as an engineer. And it was quite shocking, to be honest, coming in to see how that world operated, which was really just solving half of the problem. It was only solving the problem of what do consumers want, which is hard enough, I must admit. It's not an easy question to answer. But then you could say the businesses we were working with, and one of the reasons they would hire our business is they would get into trouble with the next step, which was, okay, now we have an insight, we've understood a need, but every single time we create a product idea, we get to a place where we cannot launch, and they would give a long list of reasons why they couldn't launch. And looking back, this was not really an insight I had at the time, but looking back, the big challenge a lot of these organizations have is the innovation is in the hands of marketing people who have very interesting career sort of cycle frequency, because they just want to sit on a brand for like 1 year, 2 years, and then move on. So they
Yeah.
never really get their arms around how a particular product type works. But also they're not technologists, and they, if anything, the factory is an obstacle for them. It's always, oh, we need to convince them to do it. And they have no understanding that they are actually not in a product business. They are in an infrastructure business. If you look at, let's take the cliche of a Unilever. Unilever is not a product company. It is a huge set of factories
Yeah.
that need to be run at full capacity in order to make any money at all. So your role as an innovator is way harder than they think it is. It's not just difficult, it's difficult enough, as I said, to figure out what people want. And now you have to answer it in a way that you can actually run through that massive infrastructure setup that you have. And that's where you could say, as an agency, we just became really good at this, being incredibly commercially savvy around what it takes to make things, what you can do easily and what is hard. And yeah, so again, very long answer, sorry, but what I was grumpy about was none of what I was seeing was what I had been taught in school,
Yep.
or what I was reading in the business books, which were all about it needs to be bold, it needs to be big, it needs to be fewer, bigger, better. And it was just this nonsense. It is just not true. And
Yep.
it's just not true. And one thing that also picking, particularly, say, I guess, a slightly off character name, because I'm generally speaking, I'm not a grumpy guy, but it really forced me to condense my thinking in order to put it to paper credibly. And I must say, Twitter at the time, now X, was the perfect notepad for that. And I think you saw the books. Actually, I pulled one out. This is like the trilogy thing. They're basically 80% of this is aphorisms, tweets. But having something like Twitter to collect your thoughts means, shit, this is going to go public, like, immediately. My clients can read this. So it forced me to be specific and not just post willy-nilly nonsense, but to think it through. And that started my writing journey, you could say, and it's definitely made me a much more aware thinker. I'm not sure if I'm a better thinker, but I am aware when I need to think things through because of that. Yeah. Meandering answer to your question, Emil. I'm going to do this a lot. Sorry up front.
No reason to be sorry. I'm here for asking the questions, and I'm expecting the answers. So you're not grumpy at all about innovation, but I've came to a similar conclusion, except for I haven't really experienced how hard innovation really is. But innovation being part of my studies, I've never grasped what innovation really means until maybe a year ago. I thought innovation is basically just disruption and technology taking over the place and being what innovative really means. And it's like a buzzword thrown all over the place. And the company being innovative doesn't mean having a cool, modern-looking branding or design, or to just the feeling of being innovative is not innovative. And one quote that I'm kind of paraphrasing here, which I recently sent you, is it's something like the innovation of now is like the plain vanilla of tomorrow.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And now kind of thinking back, things that are not just recent innovations, but like the television or something, that it's so common that I did not even think about it as an innovation, but really is a technology that is kind of put everything else into place. Just like my iPhone did, which I don't really think it's that innovative anymore, as I seen on your latest post on, I think it was the iPad Air.
Yeah. What
as
a piece
Apple
of shit
as a company that used to think differently, is just kind of selling the feeling of innovation, but it really just is making like the details, like 0.1 grams lighter, or
Yeah.
slightly bigger screen, or battery last 2 minutes longer, or something like that. So I've seen innovation is something that is so misunderstood, and even there's different kinds of like process innovation, completely market disruption, slow innovation. So, and can you pinpoint what innovation means in general to you, or
Yes.
what?
So, because there's a lot to unpack in the examples you gave,
Yeah,
the essential thing that people who are in any way touching innovation for their work need to understand is that innovation is a tool. It is not the outcome. It is the tool that a business needs to use to maintain relevance and to survive, because the world around a business will always change. And in a way, it's sort of, to use a Taleb term of being anti-fragile, it's the way a business makes sure that it can deal with changes coming from the outside. This is actually exactly what I'm basically my next book coming out in April, the disruption fallacy, will be about. Is sort of how does this really work and what does it mean? So once you've come to terms with the fact that innovation is a tool, not an outcome, then there are a couple of sort of layers down you can go, and I describe this also in some of my older books. Is the first is, why are you innovating? If you just ask yourself that question. So clearly someone said we need to innovate, that's the answer. What was the question that came before?
yep,
And then you realize that actually, from a business point of view, there are only three types of questions really. I mean, maybe you can carve them up into four, maybe you can say there's two, but in my view, there's three. Three reasons to innovate, to get out of bed and to change something to your product. The first reason, which is a universal reason, is to protect what you have. And because the world is always changing, and whether you're now building iPhones or iPad Airs, like your example, or doing laundry detergents or toothpaste, your market will go down. That's its natural state, is to basically, it's because it's all mature markets, it's all very competitive. So if you don't act, someone will eat your lunch and will
yep,
take share away from you. So you need to do new things just to show you're there, just to
yep,
maintain your relevance. And what is interesting here is this is not necessarily about improving the product at all. It's absolutely okay to sort of make sideways moves. Okay, you don't want your product to become worse, but
mm,
just to make sure that, for example, if you are on a supermarket shelf, that you have something interesting to tell the supermarket, not the consumer, but hey, you're talking to the buyer of your, I don't know, peanut butter range. Say, hey, we've done this interesting new things with the chunkiness of the pieces of peanut in there, and they'll say, oh wow, that's interesting. Maybe we can do a bit of a commercial around that, and maybe some advertising. So this is what I would call protect innovation.
mm,
This is, if anything, 80% of what you spend your time doing as an innovator in a company. It's just making sure you don't go out of business tomorrow,
yep,
maintaining the relationships you have. The second chunk, which is for someone like me, and it's basically also when, as a innovation consulting supplier, you come in, is what I would call grow innovation. So this is where you're probably doing something more dramatic, because the business question is, we need new revenue. We need to do revenue that doesn't eat the revenue we already have. We need to find new ways of selling what we can do well to a target group we might not even know. So the types of questions that then come up are things along the lines of a new target audience, which might mean you need to repackage what your product is about. So if you are moving, for example, up or down the food chain a little, and you're going to sell maybe to people of whom there are many more, but maybe have less to spend, you need to turn your offer into like a value proposition and still do it in a way that you can make money off it. You might also say, well, we've always been very successful in the DACH countries, in Germany, Austria, Switzerland. Let's see if we can crack France, which is a huge market on our doorstep. Probably means some dramatic changes to the product, particularly if it's like, for example, a food product, which comes with all kinds of cultural associations.
yeah,
Then, and again, if and you can imagine, if you're sitting, let's say, in Bremerhaven, and you're thinking, well, but this is like a German classic, we're not going to change this. While in the
mm,
meantime, in France, they have absolutely no interest in the history of the product; they just like the way it tastes, etc. You realize there's probably a lot you can do to the product, to make it succeed there. But I guess the most important thing is you're doing new things to attract new revenue. Um, Now, the third form, which is funnily enough, when you're sitting in innovation consulting, where I spent all this time, this the first question always comes in: say, we need to disrupt. We need a game changer, and honestly, that's the last thing you want, because that means you're going to destroy a lot. You're going to also destroy your own. You have to destroy your own business to do this. Disruption and innovate to transform, I would say there is one reason only to do that, is if the whole business is on the line, or if the brand is about to go extinct. Because this means you have nothing to lose. So you can change everything in the mix. You can start thinking about, okay, maybe I need a whole new format. Maybe I need a whole new audience, because the old audience isn't buying it anymore. So to hell with them. I'll find a new audience. Maybe I can play in a completely different aisle with whatever, let's say, equity or value there is still for the brand I have. And so it becomes a completely different mix. And it's much more about, okay, what do I take from the old mothership that is still worth continuing, and the rest I just toss away, which probably means most of the people involved as well. And if you start framing what transform does, then particularly if you're in my place and you're talking to clients about this, they'll say, no, we don't want that. No, we just want to see more revenue. That we want a disruptive sort of leap in the curve of our sales. So you just want to grow. Yes, that's what we want. So there is this assumption. It's basically literally why I decided to finally write a book about this, that disruption is the only way forward. No, disruption is the last way forward. If you need to disrupt, you're basically already in trouble, and you're probably on your way out. Now, that doesn't mean you should never do any projects that disrupt, because what you should, particularly say if you're in a very evolved and mature category of products, could be anything from services to products to, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. If you're at the end of the S-curve, as they say, where you're literally, everything is just about saving cost, making tiny changes, because, I mean, that's the only thing you can do with all these huge factories behind you. You should be spending some time, some of your resource on figuring out, okay, what innovation, what disruption would eventually put us all out of business, me, my competition. So it's basically if in the early 2000s you were still in the fax business, you should have been thinking about, okay, what's going to come next, because this email thing seems to be persistent and not going away. How do you secure a future that is going to give you that whole new path for growth? But that's drama. That's not really a place you want to be. It's also horrible people who do that, as in, because the people who run a business well are not necessarily the people who disrupt well. Disrupting means you need like a Steve Jobs character who is not necessarily wasn't the most pleasant man to work with, because they just have this vision, because it's the only thing you can cling on to, because there is no market yet, there is no big revenues yet. So it's, if anything, it's kind of what I'm making the case for. You only do when you're desperate, and because there's so much to gain with the grow in the growth space, which is, if you do spend like 20% of your revenues on that, you'll be in absolutely perfect condition forever. You'll never need to disrupt.
Yeah.
Again, very long answer to your question, so sorry for that.
Don't worry. Yeah. So basically, the first thing is just what you say. To make kind of a claim here, that the first kind of innovation question is basically just novelty repackaging stuff, where you can write new formula with whatever innovation ingredient,
making small steps. It's not, and because you have a business, you want the business to thrive. Make small changes. Make sure you're just always sort of on the front end, on the front foot, I should say, is the expression.
Yeah. And the second thing, so my first impression, that the second thing is more like a market field type of business development, where you just want to crack the code. And another funny thing that you brought up with the intercultural thing, as you said, like German or a German-speaking product, to get it into France, and have like French products just slightly remain for Germans who can't pronounce anything, right? That's so funny, because there are already two products in my mind who will just change in their spelling a bit to kind of appeal to the German market, with just leaving like the OT at the end, which is not pronounced and just leaving it. Or you maybe know, and it's funny because I've seen it in Tailwag Dog, the Miracle Whip example.
Yes.
Which is like CLE, miracle, but in
Yeah.
the German it is CEL because Germans would say
Miracle. Wouldn't know how to pronounce it. Yeah.
miracle or something like that. So
Yeah.
maybe it's just that, but
Yeah.
it has nothing to do with my main point. But I just find it a funny thing that maybe just the name is something you need to adjust and not the whole product.
Yeah. But maybe just to call out one more thing, because the Protect Innovation literally is driven by the calendar. It is, oh, wow, when do we need to talk to buyers again? And they look on the, oh, guys, it's this time of year again. We need to get going. Whereas to grow is a business decision. And you sort of set a plan and a strategy or an ambition of some kind. And then you start finding, okay, what's the right opportunity to then make use of? And so it's much more of a intervention almost. It's a real project you need to set up. Whereas Protect Innovation in the best organized businesses is just like a day to day. It's normal. It's part of daily business. You're always sort of on the working on whatever your version 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 is. And the version 2.0 is when everyone needs to get involved for like a proper, let's say, a revamp of the product to grow.
Just tweaking and improving products or services in the same, so you can have your stand in the competition in an already saturated market. And as you put as an example before, I'm overwhelmed with choosing toothpaste because there's so many different kind of properties, and I think this is a good example because the main product is so similar. I think like 95% of toothpaste ingredients are basically the same, but there's just some small things, and some they really try to portray what they're tackling. How much do you think is really like valuable innovation parts if they make, for example, like new particle size to make your teeth whiter? How much of this is just basically marketing, and how much of this is like really value for the customer?
Yeah, of course, it's a lot of storytelling going on. But let's be honest, it's hugely valuable if you have a $1 billion toothpaste brand. Then talking about particles, even though they were already there and just never spoken about them, is worth a lot of money. What I find personally a lot more stunning, because I'm just like I was really surprised coming as an engineer into this sort of more marketing-dominated innovation space. I'm now even more stunned every now and then coming as a, let's say, commercial innovator for big business into the world of startups, talking about sustainability, etc., where you will have like a toothpaste startup who has, I mean, like literally they barely have a desk to work at, pretending they're going to beat Colgate at making toothpaste, and that there is a way to take 5% of that market with a product that is 6 times as expensive and effectively still does exactly the same thing as a normal toothpaste does. Just because it's more sustainable or something like that. Or actually they make the product worse because then they put it into packaging that falls apart, or you need to use a toothbrush you can only use a few times because it's made of bamboo or something. That I find much more stunning is also just refusing to then see this is a market which is completely mature. You cannot come in with something which is roughly the same as what is already there and expect to have anything to do there, because it's just dominated by the existing players. That's just the infrastructure. It's become part of culture of a category and of a society. So if you are going to do sustainable things as a startup or scale up, make sure that you can either clearly replace what already exists with inclusion of a performance improvement, so they can make their toothpaste not just cleaner, but also cheaper, for example, or just do something which actually solves a problem. And for most consumers, sustainability is just not a problem. I mean, we might hope it is, and we might want it to be, but it isn't. It's not worth paying more for. So unless you find that angle in which it can work, then just don't go there. So I'm not really answering your question. I'm just going on again a bit of a sidestep there, but it's a remarkable space to be in, to be honest.
Yeah, totally. I'm here for the side steps.
Yeah.
I really want the conversations to flow and just take the twists and turns. Hold on, let a second. I need to check my battery life here, and I will cut this out. Yeah. Okay. So I chose the wrong plug. So not.
Are you okay?
Yeah, it's better for me to just check it now than before
Everything going
my
black.
computer dies. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm here for the side steps and for everything that is in between, and for thinking and doing things counterintuitively. So one thing that I found stunning about your role, as I understand it more, is you're coming from a more technical side of things when it comes to innovation, but you're still more humorous than I would have expected from like, if I would just read your CV or something. So Grumpy Innovation does have some really funny elements as well, but you really flashed this whole satire thing on Tailwag Dog. So why satire, and why is everyone so serious about business?
I don't know. It's so disappointing often. I mean, I have the book here. I took it out of the out of my bookcase. I mean, good satire, which is usually written around politics or more sort of societal-oriented topics, is about. There's a couple of tricks basically you do. Is you either sort of dramatize one element of it, or you put two things that don't go together and then see what happens. What I realized at a certain point about 2 years ago, actually I was still inside Accenture 3 years ago maybe, is that if you look at your LinkedIn feed and you just look at what some of these people are talking about, it is just outright bizarre. Where completely disconnected things from different domains will be put together. And I kind of gave myself the challenge because, of course, with the Grumpy Innovator and the tweets and the sort of the very short sentences, it's actually a little bit of a lazy way to sort of poke fun at things. So I thought, what happens if I just take this a little more serious and just see what happens? So I'm just flicking through the book. So I mean, it's not necessarily the best humor in the world, but like this whole battling vaping on one hand, and then people of my generation going into cigars. I thought, well, what if I bring those two worlds together and say, this is amazing new natural vaping stick around, which is made of leaves, and people just burn it, and it's incredible. And I guess what is particularly with your background in creativity, what is nice about humor, in particular the satire, is you take this crazy starting point, but then the creativity comes in when you sort of put that on like a timeline and sort of into its own little universe. You say, well, if this is true, what else is true then? And you can sort of build a little universe which is completely sensible in its own sort of little world and completely ridiculous if you stand outside of it. And that's kind of what I try to do. And I mean, this is my luck in a way, is I started doing this just during the rise of AI, and in particular AI visuals. And now, I mean, there's nothing wrong with my ego, but it might sound a little bit rich to say, but I'm sitting at my desk, I'm writing some of these articles, and then using AI, I make some pictures with it, and the pictures just sometimes make me laugh out loud because of a bizarre connection the AI then makes to my sort of intent. And it's just hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. And I must say the response has been actually quite good. Also online, though, a lot of people don't really dare to like my satirical articles on LinkedIn publicly, but I get plenty of direct messages to make me feel good about them. But yeah, it's definitely trying to write satire, which I've now sort of, I think I've got a handle on it, it's just been incredibly good for just forcing me to be extremely curious to what is actually going on, and asking to get it to that little nucleus. Okay, this is the crazy bit. Now let's blow it up. And again, LinkedIn or the news is rich enough. Like not even now we have with like the new administration in the US, with all the tariffs coming on. And I thought, okay, so what's one type of steel Americans would love to buy? Well, they love receiving the Statue of Liberty from France. So what if China just floods the market with statues of liberty, which is a crazy starting point. But if you say, well, that's true, okay, well, then what else is true? Well, actually, they'll send them the ship as well, so they can melt the ship down and sort of turn that back into steel. And you go down this route of bizarreness, which is absolutely hilarious. It's a wonderful world to be, and it looks a lot in a way like what innovation is about, because you have to be able to take what is an unappealing state you're in now, which is you're losing market share, you don't know where to grow, etc., and you have to turn that into a positive of, well, let's imagine for a second some of these things can be achieved. How would we do it? What would need to be true? And all these types of questions are actually really similar in innovation as they are in trying to write something funny. Yeah.
Yeah, really, imagination and curiosity play a huge role here.
Yeah.
And I think the satire does one thing pretty well, which is kind of poking a little bit onto topics, and it's probably the reason why some people might not want to publicly like your post.
Yeah.
And not because it is something wrong about them. It is sincerely not your opinion, but it's like pinpointing how hilarious and how paradoxical some topics
that's
are.
exactly it. Yeah.
One thing that stuck with me, and I just flipped a bit through like the Kindle version on my phone yesterday, preparing for this episode, and I don't know if I didn't even plan to have this like an example, but the one with the orangutans and the Nutella stuck with me because I needed, and really kudos to your humor here. I needed to chuckle a bit about this because it's so funny to think about orangutans eating as they are offered Nutella for their share of their of the rainforest. But the harsh truth behind this, they have no choice, and this is something in the figurative sense you would do to like indigenous people actually.
Yeah.
You can have a bit of the piece, a bit of the cake.
You can have your mobile phone.
Yeah.
Give us the ribbon.
We're taking your cobalt, but you can have our used phones.
Exactly. So, but here's, and that's well spotted, and also the universality. I don't know if that's really a word, but it's some of these issues just return over and over and over and over. And you're just poking a bit of fun, as in, guys, because again, the LinkedIn is. I love to hate it.
A lot of people do.
It's an indispensable tool for me, and I love being on it, and it's how I literally keep in touch with all my business friends, so to say.
Yeah.
But some of the stuff on there is just unbearable. It's just so unbearable. So I balance. I do the opposite of probably what some people do. Is I'm on LinkedIn, but I detox on Twitter. Whereas a lot of people say, oh no, if you're on Twitter too long, you need to detox from that. No, for me it's the other way around. Because at least Twitter and X is like walking into the real world. There's crazy people, there's smart people, there's poetic people, and there's crass people, and you can just pick who you want to engage with. Whereas in LinkedIn, everything is like a cleaned up version, much more virtuous than real life.
Yes, it's so extrapolated, and everything is like emphasized, and it is so cringe-worthy at some times. I really like LinkedIn. It is really indispensable for me too. Even though I chose not to post as much on LinkedIn anymore. But there's so many really bizarre and hilarious things, like tying stories on why this makes me better at sales. Like how did proposing to my girlfriend make me better at sales? And this is so, I don't know. This is so funny. It might be even like a parody. But this is really
kind of
serious.
What you wonder, is this real?
Is this,
the rise of AI has made LinkedIn worse in the sense that everyone's posting these dramatic long sort of like literally page after page, and yeah. Anyway,
It's
yeah,
all about being extremely grateful for opportunities to
yeah,
accomplish and all this hard work, and then finally paid off. And on X, or formerly Twitter, we would just say, "Yeah, I just graduated, and
yeah.
that's it.
And
Congrats."
then you'll get like a thumbs up from someone.
Yeah. Nobody cares. On
No, but yeah,
LinkedIn, you have like this long
yeah,
how hard it was, and it's like the hustle culture, and
yeah,
the status game is really something
yeah,
else on LinkedIn.
yeah,
So the next thing I kind of want to talk about is from Satire and from Grumpy Innovator to Tailwag Dog. So you were just writing on the side since 2010, where you
yeah,
started writing, right?
yeah.
So how did this emerge from like a personal branding kind of, or a side business perspective?
It was first more of an intellectual curiosity,
Yeah,
and
it's a good starting point.
yeah, and what I also noticed was because I traveled a lot. I traveled a lot. I found myself having lots of good ideas where I thought, oh, I need to remember this because it's an interesting thing to say to a customer, or it's an interesting sort of perspective on a particular challenge. But it would be too cumbersome to like write it down or put it in a notepad or anything. And I very quickly just got into the habit of posting it, just because then at least I couldn't just post anything. It had to be quality
Yeah,
and something I wouldn't be embarrassed sort of sharing with the world or rereading later.
yeah,
But after like a year or so of literally logging thoughts that way, I just found I had actually, so I was more opinionated maybe than I thought I was. I mean, I was opinionated just purely from the consulting point of view. But think, this is actually, it's at a slightly more abstract level because it's not connected to projects. It's more sort of a mindset. I was really nervous when I put them together in the first book, the first Grumpy Innovator, and then put it out. I also shared it with my business partners. Are you absolutely okay in putting this out? Because some clients might not really like it because it's clearly about sort of the business situation they're in.
mm,
And said, no, it's fine, it's okay. And in reality, clients actually, I mean, most of the clients that are attracted to me or the kind of business we had as a team would agree with the kind of the things that I highlight. So it's only just more of a fun sort of confirmation of how crazy this world is, and everyone's just trying to make it work as best as they can. So that's how it kind of started, and I just enjoyed pulling them together. And it's also just when you're in consulting and you're meeting a lot of different businesses and a lot of potential, let's say, clients. Again, that's my luck in this time of technology. That like one of these singular, say, Grumpy books, they cost like €2.50 to printing on demand. So I just hand them out. It's literally, hey, by the way, if you just had a conversation with a customer, saying, listen, I wrote this, it's fun. Sort of, you get a sense of my style, and you just leave it behind. So I've sold, I don't know, somewhere there's 7,000-8,000 of these books, but I've handed out at least as many.
yeah,
And that's so as a business card in a way, it's definitely done me well. And what is also, I guess, this is for anything you write, whatever you write about. If you write it and also reread it every now and then, it really comes part of your language. So
yeah.
it's I'm pretty good also on the spot to be quite to the point in a light and friendly way because I've thought about this and I've written it down. It's not something that just evaporates out of my head immediately. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel the same way when working on my book, that or kind of venturing out into other book ideas, which I
Yeah.
which I can't help sometimes. These ideas kind of manifest even more. These are fleeting around, and every time I get something out, it
Mm-hmm.
comes more and more of myself and my own philosophy, even if I didn't thought it isn't like matured enough in some cases. But I can really understand that.
Yeah.
Speaking of books, I really like to read. I used to not be a reader a few years ago, but I'm writing and reading more. Do you have any book recommendations?
So I have
Just
here a
generally,
shelf of books. I'm not sure if is the video also being recorded for this podcast or is it audio only?
just the audio.
Yeah, so I have a special shelf of books that really made me look at the world differently. So definitely well, if you let me just call out a couple, which if you're in the creative and innovation space, which are absolute must reads. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Mr. Persig.
Yeah.
Famous book from, what is it, 35 years ago now. It just mind blowing on how problem solving, ideas, philosophy, all this stuff sort of comes together. It gives a really interesting perspective on two sort of types of humans almost in how they deal with technology. One sees the whole, the romantic view, and the other sees the ideas inside, which is the classic view. And being able to navigate those two. It's almost like you're describing the marketing world versus the engineer's world. Then what I also this is one of the most impactful books I've ever read. It's called The Clock of the Long Now by a gentleman called Stuart Brand, who then founded the Long Now Foundation. And the premise of the book is basically a group of engineers, including Mr. Brand, who decide to build a clock that's going to run for 10,000 years. And their assumption is that it's a technology problem, which of course they very quickly figure out it isn't. It's a very different kind of problem, because what do you do if your clock gets buried under the sand for 5,000 years and someone finds it? Who knows what kind of culture then exists? How are they going to read what it is, understand what it's for? So what they basically explore is how you could say time works and how societies operate in time, and it's just absolutely wonderful. Very sort of insightful into why some things are very easy to change and why some things are just impossible to change, because they sit at a very different pace of evolution and change. So Nassim Taleb is also always a good sort of person to read if you want to think things through, particularly if it's about big numbers and small numbers and how sort of risk. And I would definitely recommend his first book, Fooled by Randomness, as a starting point, and then you can decide later on what else to read. Personally, I have a real soft spot for, here's one, which is, it's actually two fun books. The other one, it's basically about this engineering period with the golden age, which is the 50s and 60s. So Man on the Moon, about the Apollo program. By Andrew Chaikin, which is incredible. Just reading about these people who are literally engineers, then they strap themselves onto a bomb, which is effectively the rocket, shoot themselves up into the sky, land, and then go back to their desk and do more calculations and continue. And there is a funny sort of alternative to that, which is the Soviet space program, which is where a lot more people die. But it's just this crazy period of these people who could just do everything. And kind of the only thing comparable right now is SpaceX, where you just have a very young group of people, because I think the average age in SpaceX is early 30. And it's only a few hundred people, but they're doing things that, again, Boeing or NASA can no longer do, because they've just become too locked into their own infrastructure. They have too many different functions, too many specialists, when you need these really smart generalists, and you really need to be brutally honest in picking the smart ones and not the less smart ones, the brave ones and not the less brave ones, to get this done. I mean, connected to that, recently also read a book, again, very insightful on how innovation works, which is called Skunk Works, by one of the former directors of the Lockheed Martin program. Now, not that it is about military technology in this case, but what it especially is how hard it is to do fundamentally difficult technical problems and how to solve them, and that it is not something which is easy to capture in like a stage gate with 6 steps from, say, start to product launch, and that you can plan that very precisely. It is way messier. So also the reason why that transform innovation, which we talked about in the beginning, is so hard. It is just completely unpredictable, because you have no idea yet what the problems are, and nevertheless you have committed to solving them, which is just it just requires another another way of thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Kostas.
You're very welcome, Emil.
So the time is slowly getting to an end. On my side, I'm just super curious and willing to do a part 2 and talking to you about these kind of stuff.
With pleasure.
And yeah, so see you next time.
If you've enjoyed listening to my podcast, you can show support by following me and hit the bell to never miss out on my latest content. I'd appreciate a positive review too. You can find more of my content on www.emildruth.com. Thanks and bye for now.